Hello, everyone. My name is Kinga Nolan, and I am product marketing intern here at Farmer's Edge. And this afternoon, I'm joined again by Cheryl McLaurin, territory sales agronomist for the Southern Plains area. Hey, Cheryl, it's great to have you back on. How are you doing today?
Hey Kinga, it's so much fun to talk to you. Glad to be back. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Is it hot down there again today?
Oh my gosh, I sound like such a broken record. It's hot again. It's not 107 today, so that's a yay. It's 100, so that's
Oh, okay. Well, a
just
little bit
that.
less.
Yeah, we're having an excellent dry down on our corn for sure. That made it.
Oh, my
But
goodness.
yeah, so we're getting into this is actually a really timely talk for us because we down here are so much farther ahead of everybody else's calendar. We're actually starting to soil sample down here, so I thought this was a good topic for us to talk about this week.
Oh, wow, that's perfect timing then. So I know
Yeah.
we're talking about soil sampling today. We're talking about some variable rates. So really excited
Mhm.
to kick this off with you again.
Yeah, so that's kind of like one of the main focuses and benefits from Farmer's Edge and our Farm Command software system is being able to use these variable rates across your farm and identifying management zones versus just a spot of high pH or low pH. And then we'll go in and soil sample across those zones, not just every 3 years, which is the typical, but we will do it a little bit, like a third, a third, and a third every year, so that
Right.
we're knowing exactly how much is being pulled out. Because like last year in some of our northern plains areas, we had a really, really dry year. So our crops didn't make as well as we'd like to, which is sad. But also we had a lot of fertilizer left over from last year. So we will,
Definitely.
even if we had just run a regular removal rate on, say, a cornfield, we might have over applied this year. And with fertilizer prices being like what they have been, we don't want to do that. And if you had a really good year or you had a really wet year, like some of, again, the Northern Plains is having this year, you may see a higher leaching component than you would have seen in other years. So it is really good that we're going back every year and just double checking and then extrapolating across your zones. Or excuse me, not extrapolating, interpolating across your zones. So yeah, we'll talk about that. I was going to run through how we would do a zone
Yeah.
for like a brand new farmer real quick, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, for sure. Let's do that.
Okay, perfect. Just a sec. All right. So this is a farmer, and what we'll typically do is go in and say for a couple of different years, when crops are up and healthy, not during dry down or anything like that, pull in some of our imagery. And Farm Command has some great flyovers, so we get imagery just unless there's some crazy weather going on, at least once a week, typically 2 to 3 times a week. Now, if we do get a large rain system or a tropical system that comes through here, which is something we deal with in South Texas, we may miss a week or so just because of cloud cover. So I pulled in 2020 and 2021. I knew that this field had been in cotton, so we went for later in the season. Later in the season. And it looks like 2021 is going to give us our best imagery. So when I pull this up, because it's nice and bright and pink and red, because this is a false color imagery that just gives us where what actually is the green part of the field. And so I would come in and pick way too many zones. Like I'd probably do 15 or 16 because we want to make sure that we see all the differences and then identify which ones are the important differences, if that makes sense.
Right.
So I would go in and click that, and I'm not going to click through this because it takes a little bit of time, but I've pulled it up on another field. So this is what that would look like.
Oh, wow. Look at that.
Yeah, it's a big jigsaw puzzle, basically. And we're not going to manage to polygons that are this size. So I'll go in and use my knowledge as an agronomist and with conversations with the grower, and we'll make sure that we have accurate management zone sizes, that we're not going too small or too big. And that is a lot of times it depends both on the variability of the field and how that grower likes to manage his farm. If we just want to cut out the very worst and the very best parts, that's fine. If we want to know exactly where it's changing, a little bit at a time, a field this size would have anywhere from, say, 4 zones to maybe up to 7 or 8, just depending
Oh,
on your
wow.
equipment and that sort of thing. So we can get into it with some really fine detail there. But also we want to make sure that our smallest zones are not, struggle. We're not making the equipment struggle to turn off and on or adjust rates as we go across the field too. So like if I came in and had
utility, right?
did everything that I was going to do, it would come out to probably these 1, 2, 3, 4 zones. So pink is our worst, yellow is our best. A lot of times we'll see old access roads or old like silo, what's the word I'm looking for? Pads as bad zones, just kind of in the middle of the field, or if it's a low spot, that kind of thing, or even our sandy spot, it could be the wettest and the driest. Now I would probably go in and smooth some of these lines out personally, but this is just a for instance case here. And you will see that there's usually a pattern across the field. Mm-hmm. One of the things that's really interesting to me is in a previous life, I was a soils mapper for NRCS, which is a division of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And we are always mapping to limitations and uses. And that's a lot of how our zones are. So a lot of our farmers, have issues with zone sampling. But at the same time, we're still pulling out all that important information. We are saying, okay, this is the area I can make the most on, and this is the area I can make the least on. And those zones and soils maps, which we can see here, this is that field. Let me point it out right here. So this field is actually not very variable. This is a very large field. It's about, I want to say it's about a 300-acre field that's farmed all the way across, and it only has 3 different soil types, which is kind of unusual. I have some that look like squiggles all over it, especially if they're closer to a stream system. But if it's got an area of sand, an area of low pH, an area of low phosphorus, those sorts of things, we can go in and identify what those limiting factors are. But at the end of the day, we're going to lump it into the poor section of the field versus the better section of the field. So we definitely want to identify what those limiting factors are. But when it comes to how we're going to treat our fields and how we're going to apply and how we're going to adjust our seeding rates, it's definitely going to be on a good, better, best part of the field, or even worse part of the field kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Yep. No, that makes sense.
Okay, so that's how we go along. So go ahead. Did you have a question?
Yeah, so like the maps that we're looking at specifically, like, are we looking at like variable rate, like fertility, or is this fungicide?
So this one is going to be a fertility map. We can have conversations with the growers and base these zone maps off of old yield data, off of elevation data, all those sorts of things. Or in some cases, we'll go in with like real-time imagery that was taken last week or a couple of days beforehand for fungicide applications or insecticide applications. Like we can identify where we're getting damage in the field, or hail damage has happened, and we'll go in and do like a nutritional and a fungicide on those damaged areas to help them recover. So we can do all kinds of, I usually am just referring to a VR fertilizer map. But we can have a, something we've been doing a lot of is, variable rate growth, plant growth, PGRs, plant growth regulators. My goodness, I can't remember anything today, on our cotton fields. And so we'll use, within the last day or two, imagery to see, okay, these areas of the field are getting really bushy and getting really green. And of course, we have our farmers ground truth them and say, okay, yep, that looks great. That's how we're going to go. Mm-hmm. And we can either do a no mid rate and a high rate of PGR, or we can come in with a low, mid, and high kind of thing. We can do those. We can make these zones work for whatever we need them to work for. But when we talk about VR fertility, for most of our farmers, they immediately think about VR fertilizer applications, not just crop, but we can do crop protectants, insecticides, anything like that too. So yeah. And then when we come out to it, at the end of the day, we do these zones so that we can do our directed sampling. So we'll do our zone maps with our growers first. We'll go and sit down with the grower and say, okay, does this look right to you? Because we also want to make sure that the years that we're looking at, we have some as an agronomist in this region, I have some knowledge of years past and farming and that sort of stuff. Last year was a really great year for farming in Texas. It was mild. We had some moisture. It was unheard of. I think there was 3 days over 100 in July. It was perfect.
Oh, wow.
We've already had our hottest this year. We've already had our hottest December, May, June, July, and probably August on record. I think we're in Central Texas. We're 45 days over 100 degrees already for the year.
Wow.
So that's not ideal. So we really wouldn't want to, unless we expect that we're going to have every year like this year, we wouldn't really want to make our zone maps based on this year.
Right.
And if we also had like a super, super wet year, we really wouldn't want to base it on that because, you know, our wet areas, which in a dry year are a great area, or a typical year are our great areas. You know, if it's been raining, those wet areas get flooded out. So it kind of inverts what you would think would be a part of that field. So we want to sit down with the grower and be like, you know, why does this look right? Why do these areas look bad? And, you know, sometimes people are like, oh, we need to cut that out because that's like an old home site that we just kind of mow around kind of thing. We disc around it. So we want to make sure that those are considered either a cutout or a null area in the field. So this process is always a two-way conversation with the grower to make sure that they are getting what they need out of their service and that we are managing their property correctly. And so once we've got all that, we'll move into a soil sampling. So this is where we're at this year. We're picking points, and we do have a randomized sampling so that, you know, that's good science as a random sample. Yeah. We'll go back to those points every year. And like I said, do a third, and a third. But we want to make sure that we're doing apples to apples. So we want to be sampling in the same areas. We typically will do a minimum of 6 samples per zone, no matter what the size of the zone. And we do try to aim for a minimum of 10 acres per sample, sometimes more. I don't really I try to make sure we don't go any under that. I'll usually throw in a couple of extras to, just make sure that we're getting everything we need to do. And we'll go in, and these will be year after year. We'll have these points, and our samplers will go out. They have a little tablet, and it drives them right to the point they need to go to. They'll hit log, take their sample, and we have a really cool little video on our Farmer's Edge channel of one of our samplers going out and doing it, and it shows exactly how they get to do it. Most of the guys are on a Ford or a Toyota truck that's got an in-cab sampler, which is really neat. It's nice when it's 105 degrees out, so that really helps out for everybody. And then, you know, if we get into a wetter area or we're needing to go off-road a little bit, we also have side-by-sides, and we'll use those, you know, if we have fields that are hipped up or it's just wet kind of thing, and you don't want to be sliding or damaging anybody's property for sure. And so that's kind of how we get started when it comes soil sampling time. So
wow.
Does that kind of give you a good overview of how we start these sorts of things?
Yeah, definitely. Like when you kind of showing, okay, here's what the field looks like. Here's how we pull in the different imagery layers. We have some options as to what we pull, and picking the zones, having that conversation, and then finally actually doing the sampling.
Yeah. And let me show you how this kind of works out into our actual like day-to-day when we look at these fields.
That'd be great.
I'll pull this over real quick too. So this is this year in that same field. It was a little dry, so we went back to May, and this field was in corn this year, not cotton. So, you know, cotton doesn't get nice and green down here until about June or July. Corn's a little bit earlier, so it's in May. We're even harvesting sweet corn in May in some areas. Oh my goodness. So if I pull in our zone map, we can see here, I got a couple of layers up, that we can see those better areas show up in our, let me pull it into the,
I was going to say they look actually quite similar, like especially kind of the center on the right and kind of that top left piece.
Yeah.
Quite similar to the imagery.
Same. Let me pull that same. So if you're ever in Farm Command on our map manager, we've got just about as much data as you could ever want. So let me go back to May. I've got way too many layers on this field. So let me turn this off real quick. And legend. And I'm going to turn this guy off. And this guy off. And then if I go over to my zones, which is down here at the bottom, and I want to turn on the, oh, I got to take it off and then put it back on just to get the.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, there we go. So we've got a, so this is the straight NDVI. And so those are our zones over it. And then we pull our scouting app up real quick. Scouting map from May. You can see where it started to get really dry for sure. Okay, and then I gotta reorder it. That's the thing.
I remember you and I having a conversation. We talked about taking some imagery from last year for cotton root rot and seeing how we could make a fungicide map for the next season to kind of like a pre-application sort of thing.
Yeah. So cool. I think that's one of the neatest, because so cotton root rot is soil borne, not wind borne. Well, here, let me show you. So you can see exactly that the good areas show up.
Oh, look at that. It's like a perfect match pretty much.
Just about. Wow. Yeah. So we can see our bad areas in here and our good areas up here and down here. So a good zone map is very accurate. And I've overlaid these with yield maps, and it's like, I put one up on my Twitter account this morning that was just, I mean, it was a perfect lineup just about. But yeah, so when we're talking about things like cotton root rot, when we talk about variable rate fertilizer or fungicide, a lot of people are like, well, I'm just going to spray the whole field. And that makes sense sometimes. But cotton root rot specifically is soil borne. It's not blown across the field. And it's a very expensive chemical. The price came down a little bit this year on that specific chemical, but it's still not great. And it has to be done either at seeding or right after seeding with a hooded application, because it can damage the leaves of cotton plant. But because it's so expensive, I mean, it can be up to $50 an acre for that.
Holy smokes.
Application.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really expensive. Wow. And you'll see cotton root rot as just a clear patch it's just spotty. So if you can go and just hit those spots and treat only a third of the field versus the entire thing, that saves you a ton of money when it comes to doing some of these preventative applications for it. And, you don't, not only are you spraying less fungicide, but you're protecting yield. So definitely. there's that application as well. We deal with a lot of cotton down here. So a lot of my use cases for zone maps are based in cotton or soybeans, that kind of thing. But we are also able to do VR fungicide, I believe, in canola up in Canada as well. A lot of guys up there will use it too.
Yeah, we see a lot of that here.
So I think that's pretty neat. I had never really heard of it until we started working with it in this cotton situation, doing VR with fungicide. And now I'm really excited to start working on VR PGRs with a lot of our guys down here too. It's been a struggle this year because it's so hot down here. Yeah. I saw the weather report, and maybe some of our panhandle guys are going to get some rain, but Central and South Texas is just a nice little hole in the clouds kind of thing.
Oh, it's too bad. Yeah. So I'll jump back to the variable rate. So we talked about, you do these zone maps, we do the sampling. So then, the samples are processed, and then what happens? Like, do you look at the data and then give recommendations or?
Yeah, let me pull up our Farm Command Center real quick. So this is something that our growers are able to see. Give me just a second to share it. Here we go. Sorry, there we go. So we've got this nifty little Farm Command Center here that's really, really neat. So it's taken just a little bit of time to load up. Let me get there. So I'm going to go straight to this one. So I always print off all of our maps for our growers, so they have a paper copy, but things are just going into a digital format these days, and it just makes it a lot nicer to be able to have everything on a computer Let's see if I might need to click them off and back on again. Sometimes that happens.
So lots of data to load for sure.
Yeah, so. That's the thing that always happens.
Yeah, you're like, I want to see everything, and I want to see it right now.
Right now, yeah. So, yeah, here we go. So I've been to Egypt.
There you go.
It's always fun when I get to go to Egypt and Paris in the same day because it's Texas.
Oh, that's hilarious.
So we have these really neat little, and they're done by zone. So everything is aggregated by zone. We have let me swap our, no, you're good. Let me swap our phosphorus over to this. And so we can see where we have good areas and bad areas and that sort of thing. So what'll happen a lot of times, this was last year, and I know that this field in particular got flooded out.
Okay.
So a lot of the phosphorus that we had put in this field didn't get used by a plant. So it just stayed there. And we know we might need to do a half rate in some of these zones this year. So that was great because we can see it goes from basically no phosphorus of 0.82 parts per million to a, in this area, I think it's 11. Yeah. So 11 parts per million. And the good thing is we have in-house sampling. So when we do our soil sampling, everything is bag tagged at the field, goes to the lab in Grimes, Iowa. And usually within less than 7 business days, I've never seen it take longer than that. And sometimes within 4 or 5, it gets loaded into Farm Command Center and you can see it from wherever you're at. And we can make some, it's got this neat little sliders. So if we want to say everything below, let me swap over to potassium. So anything that is below 125, we want to say we need to put a full rate on. Between 125, we need to put a build rate on. So it'd be what the plant needs plus some.
Right.
And anything above 270, we won't need to put anything on. But between those two, we want to do, maybe some maintenance levels or some sufficiency, just whatever our crop removal is. So we can see that, and we can see that on a farm level at the same time. You can get a good idea of, okay, do I need to go and put some serious money out this year, or can we get through this year into next year kind of thing?
Right.
So like pole barn, that has been in hay previously. So we definitely need to go out and get some more potassium out there. But just down the road from it, this field,
it's looking pretty good.
We're great. We don't need to put anything in there. So that's a really handy tool to me to be able to see like visually and at a high level across everything what we might need kind of thing. And that also is really nice to a farmer when you can show them, hey, you're all green. You don't need to do anything. It's just that visual like, oh, God. Yeah. And so, and then we also have the ability to do the same thing for our CEC and our pHs and those sorts of things so that we know where our salty areas are, where our heavier soils are, those sorts of things just across the board. And down in this area, we've got the Colorado River right here. And then there's also, that scrolled really fast. So we've got the Colorado and we've got the San Bernard. So, we've had some pretty large flooding issues. Right. This area was basically where Hurricane Harvey sat. So some of these fields were under 5 to 15 feet of water for more than a week. So, the surfaces can be very variable in these areas. I got some areas up closer to the Red River area that just, it's a little bit drier up there. Things are under pivot. They've been in production for several decades. It's not nearly as variable. We can do some larger management zones that area. In here, we usually tend to make things a little bit tighter. And we do offer grid sampling. Our service is built around zone mapping because even when you have a grid sample, you're still going to build a prescription that's a zone-based approach. So we do go back to a zone even when we're doing a grid sample. But if we have, we just really got to dig in and figure out exactly what's an issue, or if we might have like some toxicity issues or anything like that. We can off that. But again, all of this farm command center and all that sort of stuff is built around a zone-based approach. So we will go back and build a zone based on your grid sampling. So yeah, so that's kind of how all of this works together. And then we can put in our zone maps, and we've even got some nitrogen models that we can do on a zone basis as well. So yeah, it's a really good aggregator of soils information. And that's always what we want to do. Is it too wet? Is it too dry? Is pH too high? Is pH too low? You know, those sorts of things. We can, I try to describe to somebody one time, kind of what happens is you may think of every soil variable as kind of like a layer.
Okay.
And so you've got pH, you've got phosphorus, you've got even things like sulfates and calciums, you know, stacked up, where you've got high, you know, the right numbers, you know, think of it nice and thick, and where you've got low numbers, it's real thin. By the time you've aggregated all of the goods and the bads across it, you might have an area that's slightly bad in phosphorus, but it's still a good producing area because all the other variables in that spot are good, and the plant can still, you know, catch up from that one deficiency. A lot of times our bigger drivers like pH and CEC, which is our water, which is going to be related to our water holding capacity and those sorts of things. Those can be our biggest drivers of what a good or bad area is. Everybody talks about their sand spots, or down here we'll have calcium spots where you've got limestone in the middle of a field that has no, you know, it's a soil of pH 4 with a 7 in the middle of it, kind of thing.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so we'll get these like weird limestone outcrops and that sort of thing. And you guys up there will have like these boggy areas in the middle of fields, and sometimes like full on wetlands and that sort of stuff. So those are going to be a bigger issue than whether you have a boron deficiency or a sulfur deficiency kind of thing. So it's kind of that aggregation of limiting and non-limiting factors, and that's kind of how those zones are shown, work together and are expressed in a yield map kind of thing. So, and then our soil test let us define what is going on in those zones.
Absolutely.
Kind of thing. So,
wow. Yeah, no, you did a great job explaining. I've learned a lot today for sure.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So my background again is in soil podology and classification. So give me a chance to go dig a hole and talk about things. It's a little too much. My most fun is when we have a soil sampler call out sick and I have to go.
Oh darn.
You know?
Oh, that's fantastic.
And I've also discovered that our sampling side by sides have Bluetooth and very loud speakers. So I'm having a great time kind of thing.
Oh my goodness. That's fun.
Kinga, so if there's any other questions you might have, you know, you guys, anybody's watching can always drop us a comment or contact us on Twitter. Definitely. And, you know, I know we're always out here. We've always got boots on the ground. Right now you'll see Farmer's Edge sampling trucks all over Texas, and they'll just it's like ants. They just slowly move north. But yeah.
Out and then back. Yeah.
Yes.
There we go. Fantastic. Well, thanks so much, Cheryl, for walking us through soil sampling and variable rate today. That was great, and I'm sure we'll be talking soon.
Oh yes. Thanks, Kinga.
So, all right. Thanks everyone for joining. Take care.
Goodbye.